Marcus Washington wiped the sweat from his forehead as he loaded feed bags into his truck. It was a hot Texas evening, and the supply run to town had taken longer than expected. His ranch was waiting. 500 acres of dreams turned reality, 20 years in the making. The sun was setting as he drove back on the lonely highway. Marcus had built everything from scratch after leaving the Marines. 3 tours overseas had taught him discipline, courage, and the value of peace. When he came home, he wanted nothing more than quiet land, honest work, and a legacy to pass down. His phone buzzed. A text from his ranch hand, Miguel. "Boss, something's not right. Saw trucks on the south fence." Marcus frowned. The south fence bordered Cartel territory. For months, they'd been pressuring him to let them use his land as a passage route. 3 times they'd come with offers. 3 times Marcus had refused. This was his land, built with his own hands, and he wouldn't let it become part of their dirty business. He pressed the accelerator harder. Then he saw it. Orange flames pierced the darkening sky, visible even from 15 miles away. Marcus's heart dropped into his stomach. That glow was coming from his ranch, his home. No, he whispered, pushing the truck to its limits. The closer he got, the worse it became. Thick black smoke billowed into the evening air. The smell of burning wood and gasoline filled his lungs even before he reached the gate. When he finally arrived, his worst nightmare had come true. Everything was burning. The main house where he'd lived for 15 years, engulfed in flames. The stables where he kept his horses collapsed into burning rubble. The equipment shed with all his tools and machinery, destroyed. His grandfather's barn, the one structure he'd lovingly restored board by board, crumbling as the roof caved in with an explosion of sparks. Sheriff Tom Bradley was already there with 2 deputies, but they could only watch. The fire department was on its way, but Marcus knew it was too late. Everything was already gone. "Marcus," the sheriff approached carefully. "I'm so sorry." Marcus couldn't speak. He just stared at 20 years of his life turning to ash. Every sunrise he'd watched from that porch. Every fence he'd mended with his own hands. Every dream he'd built into those structures, all of it burning away. "We have witnesses," Sheriff Bradley continued, his voice heavy. 3 trucks came about an hour ago. At least a dozen men. They had cartel plates, Marcus. They poured gasoline everywhere and lit it up. This was planned. This was a message. Marcus's jaw clenched. He'd known refusing them would have consequences, but he never imagined this. They hadn't just attacked his property. They'd attacked his soul, his purpose, everything he'd worked for since leaving the military. Where was Miguel? Marcus asked quietly. They sent him away first. Told him if he stayed, he'd burn with the buildings. He's shaken up but alive. He's the one who called us. Marcus nodded slowly. At least no one had died. But as he watched his grandfather's barn collapse completely, something inside him collapsed too. Not his spirit, never that. But his patience. His willingness to let the system handle it. "What happens now?" Marcus asked, though he already knew the answer. Sheriff Bradley sighed deeply. "Honestly, I'll file reports. We'll investigate. But you know as well as I do, these cartels operate beyond our reach. The border's right there. They cross back and forth like ghosts. Even if we identify who did this, actually arresting them, getting them prosecuted, Marcus, it could take years. It might never happen. So they just get away with it." "I didn't say that. I said the law has its limits." The sheriff looked at him meaningfully. "But I also know you're not just any rancher. I know who you were before you came here." Marcus met his eyes. Sheriff Bradley had served 2 years ago. He understood things that paperwork and procedures couldn't fix. He understood that sometimes evil counted on good men accepting limitations. The fire department arrived and began spraying water on the flames, but it was mostly to prevent the fire from spreading to the surrounding grassland. The structures themselves were lost. Firefighters moved efficiently, professionally, but even they looked somber. Everyone in the county knew Marcus. Everyone respected what he'd built. As the flames were slowly brought under control, Marcus walked through what remained of his property. Charred wood and twisted metal were all that was left. The smell of destruction hung heavy in the air. He found the remains of his grandfather's workbench. The old man had built it in 1952. Now it was just ashes. He knelt down and picked up a piece of charred wood from the barn. His grandfather had taught him carpentry at that workbench, had taught him that a man's worth wasn't in what he said, but in what he built. what he stood for. They think they've won, Marcus said to himself. They think burning this down will break me. But they'd made a critical mistake. They'd assumed Marcus Washington was just a rancher. They'd forgotten, or never knew, that before he was a rancher, he was a Marine. And before that, he'd been a kid from nothing who'd learned that you don't stay down when life knocks you over. Marcus pulled out his phone. His hands were steady as he scrolled through his contacts. He found the name he was looking for. Jackson Jax Rivera. They hadn't spoken in 2 years. Life had taken them in different directions after the service. But some bonds don't break with time or distance. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. Marcus Washington. It's been too long, brother. Jax. Marcus's voice was calm but carried an edge that his old team leader recognized immediately. I need to ask you something. I'm listening. You remember that promise we made? That if any of us ever truly needed the team, the others would come? Silence on the other end. Then I remember. What happened? They burned it down, Jax, everything. My ranch, my home, everything I built. The cartel did it because I wouldn't let them use my land. More silence. Marcus could almost hear Jax's mind working, understanding immediately what Marcus was really asking. You're not calling for sympathy, Jax said finally. No. You're calling because you're about to do something. I'm calling because I'm going to need my brothers. Jax exhaled slowly. How many? However many still remember what we stood for, what we fought for. Give me 6 hours. The call ended. Marcus stood there in the ruins of his ranch, smoke still rising around him, and felt something shift inside. The rancher was still there, that wouldn't change. But the warrior he'd been was waking up. The cartel had sent him a message written in fire and destruction. It was time to send one back. As the last flames were extinguished and darkness fell completely, Marcus made a decision. He wouldn't rebuild just yet. First, he had a different kind of work to do. The kind of work that required different tools than hammers and nails. Sheriff Bradley approached one more time before leaving. Marcus, whatever you're thinking, I'm thinking about justice, Tom, real justice. The sheriff looked at him for a long moment, then nodded slowly. Be careful. And remember, I can't know about things I don't see. As the sheriff drove away, Marcus stood alone in the darkness, surrounded by the ashes of his old life and the ember of something new beginning to burn. Tomorrow, his brothers would arrive, and then they'd ride south. The night felt endless. Marcus sat on the hood of his truck, staring at the smoking ruins until dawn broke over the horizon. He hadn't slept. Couldn't sleep. Every time he closed his eyes, he saw the flames consuming everything he'd built. But he wasn't crying. He wasn't broken. He was planning. His phone buzzed as the first light touched the sky. A text from Jax, wheels up. Be there by noon. Marcus allowed himself a small smile. Jax never wasted words. If he said noon, he meant noon. And if he said he was coming, that meant others were too. By 9 in the morning, the news had spread through town. Neighbors started arriving with coffee, food, and sympathy. Mrs. Henderson from the neighboring ranch brought breakfast. Oh, Marcus, this is just terrible. Who would do such a thing? Bad people, Mrs. Henderson, but don't worry. They'll answer for it. Something in his tone made her pause. She'd known Marcus for 15 years, had watched him build his ranch from nothing. She'd never heard that edge in his voice before. You're not going to do anything foolish, are you? Marcus smiled gently. I'm going to do what's right. Sometimes those look the same, but they're not. By 11, Marcus had sent everyone home. He needed the property clear for what was coming. He walked to the foreman's cottage, the only building the cartel hadn't touched, probably because it was hidden behind a grove of trees. It would serve as their base of operations. At exactly noon, he heard the first vehicle coming up the long driveway. A black pickup truck pulled in, dust rising behind it. The door opened and out stepped Jackson Rivera, Jax to everyone who'd served with him. He was 42 now, hair starting to gray at the temples, but he moved with the same confident grace Marcus remembered. Former SEAL Team 3, Bronze Star recipient, a man who'd pulled Marcus out of an ambush in Ramadi that should have killed them both. They gripped hands, then pulled into a brief, firm embrace. Damn, brother, Jax said, looking at the destruction. They really did a number on you. They thought they were ending something, Marcus replied. They were wrong. That's what I figured when you called. Jax opened the truck bed, revealing several large duffel bags. So I brought friends. Over the next 2 hours, they arrived one by one. Each vehicle brought another piece of Marcus's past, another brother from the wars they'd fought together. Carlos Rodriguez came next. Former intelligence specialist, now working private security. He'd been the guy who could find information anyone else said didn't exist. Quiet, analytical, deadly when needed. He pulled up in a rental SUV and emerged with a laptop bag and a knowing smile. "Marcus, heard you had some trouble with your neighbors." "The kind of neighbors who don't respect property lines," Marcus replied. "Well, lucky for you, I'm great with boundary disputes." David Chen arrived third. Communications expert. The man who'd kept their team connected through the worst firefights in Afghanistan. He was shorter than the others, wore glasses now, but his mind was still the sharpest tool in any room. "You know," Chen said, unpacking equipment from his car, "normal people just call the police when they have problems." "I did," Marcus said. "They told me what I already knew. The system has limits, and you're about to operate outside those limits, way outside." Chen grinned. "Good, I was getting bored with corporate IT work anyway." They kept coming. McKinley, their former medic, who now ran a clinic for veterans. Thompson, weapons specialist who'd become a firearms instructor. Washington, no relation to Marcus, who'd been their demolitions expert and now taught high school chemistry. Each man arrived with gear, skills, and a shared understanding. They didn't need long explanations. They'd all served together, bled together, trusted each other with their lives in the worst places on earth. When one of their brothers called, you came. No questions, no hesitation. By mid-afternoon, 15 men stood in Marcus's foreman's cottage. 15 warriors who'd retired from the service but had never stopped being warriors. They ranged from 38 to 45 years old. Some had families. Some had careers. All of them had dropped everything to answer this call. Jax called them to order. "All right, let's be clear about what's happening here. We're all civilians now. Nobody's active duty. This isn't a sanctioned operation. We do this, we're completely on our own. The Navy doesn't know we're here. The government doesn't know we're here. We succeed or fail by ourselves," Rodriguez added. "And if it goes wrong, there's no rescue. No backup, no legal protection. We'll be treated as criminals, possibly terrorists depending on how bad it gets." Marcus looked around the room at these men. They'd all given years of their lives to serve their country. They'd followed orders, operated within the rules, done everything by the book. And now he was asking them to step outside all of that. "I need to say something," Marcus spoke up. "I'm asking a lot here. Too much, probably. You all have lives now, families, careers. I'm asking you to risk everything because some criminals burned down my ranch. That's not fair. That's not reasonable, and I won't hold it against any man who walks out right now." The room was silent. No one moved. Thompson spoke first. "Marcus, you took a bullet in your leg pushing me out of the line of fire in Fallujah. That bullet was meant for my head. You think I'm not showing up when you need me?" McKinley nodded. "You visited me every day in the hospital after that IED. Brought me books, talked to me when I wanted to give up. I owe you." "We all owe each other," Jax interrupted. "That's what brotherhood means. But this is bigger than debt. Marcus, tell them what you told me on the phone, the real reason we're here." Marcus took a breath. "The Zaragoza cartel controls this entire border region. They traffic drugs, weapons, people. They've corrupted officials on both sides of the border. They burn down anyone who won't cooperate. They've killed families, destroyed communities, and they do it because they believe they're untouchable." He paused, looking at each man. "I'm not asking you to help me get revenge. I'm asking you to help me do what the system can't or won't do. We're going to dismantle their operation, gather evidence, cut off their supply lines, and deliver their leadership to people who will actually prosecute them. You're talking about a full tactical operation on foreign soil," Chen said carefully. "That's an act of war if anyone finds out." "I'm talking about justice," Marcus corrected. "The kind that actually works. The kind that protects other people from what happened to me." Rodriguez pulled out his laptop. "I've been doing research since Jax called me. The Zaragoza cartel operates out of a compound 30 miles south of the border. Miguel El Cuervo Zaragoza runs it personally. He's the one who ordered the hit on your ranch, Marcus. He's also wanted for 17 murders, countless assaults, trafficking charges that would put him away for life if anyone could actually arrest him. The DEA's been trying for 5 years," McKinley added. "Why do we think we can do better?" Jax smiled coldly. "Because the DEA has to follow rules. They need warrants, jurisdiction, approval. They can't just walk into a fortified compound in Mexico and take what they need. But we can, Marcus finished. Washington, the demolitions expert, leaned back in his chair. Okay, I'm hearing a lot of what, but not much how. 30 miles into Mexico, fortified compound, probably 30 or 40 armed guards. We're 15 middle-aged guys who haven't run an op together in years. How exactly do we pull this off? The same way we always did, Jax replied. Superior planning, superior tactics, and the element of surprise. These cartel soldiers aren't trained operators. They're thugs with guns. They've never faced anyone who actually knows what they're doing. Rodriguez pulled up satellite images on his laptop. I have current intel on the compound. Guard rotation, security systems, layout. My company does contract work for some 3-letter agencies. I have access to resources. Resources that you're not supposed to share, Chen pointed out. Resources that I'm choosing to share, Rodriguez corrected. For a good cause. The planning began in earnest. Maps spread across the table. Each man fell into old roles naturally. Jax coordinated overall strategy. Rodriguez provided intelligence. Chen worked on communications and electronic warfare. McKinley planned medical contingencies. The others divided into teams based on their specialties. As the afternoon wore into evening, something remarkable happened. These 15 men who'd been living separate civilian lives transformed back into a unified fighting unit. The years melted away. Jokes flew, old stories resurfaced, but underneath it all was deadly serious purpose. We go in 3 teams, Jax outlined. Team 1 secures the perimeter and cuts communications. Team 2 infiltrates the main building, secures El Cuervo and grabs any evidence we can find. Team 3 destroys their product and documents everything for prosecution. When? Marcus asked. Tomorrow night. They'll be complacent, not expecting anything. The longer we wait, the more chance someone notices 15 heavily armed men hanging around the border. Thompson looked at Marcus. You sure about this? Last chance to back out. Marcus thought about his grandfather's barn in ashes. About 20 years of work destroyed in an hour. About a system that couldn't or wouldn't protect people from predators. About other ranchers, other families, other victims who had no one to stand up for them. I've never been more sure of anything, he said quietly. The 15 men looked at each other, a silent acknowledgement passing between them. They'd made their choice. Tomorrow they would cross a line that couldn't be uncrossed. They would operate outside the law to serve something higher, justice that the law couldn't deliver. As night fell, they continued planning. Weapons were checked, equipment distributed, contingencies prepared. They worked through the night like they had dozens of times before, except this time it was personal. This time they weren't following orders from above. This time, they were writing their own orders, and tomorrow, the cartel would learn what happens when you burn down the wrong man's ranch. Tomorrow, they would ride south. Morning came with a weight that none of them had felt in years. Marcus stood outside the cottage watching the sunrise, coffee in hand, thinking about the invisible line they were about to cross. Not just the border between countries, but the border between who they'd been and who they were about to become again. Second thoughts? Jax appeared beside him, his own cup steaming in the cool morning air. Not about what we're doing, Marcus replied. Just thinking about how we got here. I spent 20 years building peace. Now I'm going back to war. Sometimes peace has to be defended, Jax said quietly. That's what we learned overseas. The difference is this time we're defending your peace, your home. That makes it personal. Inside, the others were going through final preparations. But this wasn't like the old days. They couldn't just load up military vehicles and roll out. Everything had to look civilian, normal, invisible. Chen had worked through the night, creating false identities for all of them. We're crossing at 3 different points, he explained, handing out passport copies and documentation. Rodriguez, you're taking 5 guys as a corporate security team doing cross-border assessment. Thompson, you've got 5 as hunting enthusiasts heading to a ranch outside Monterey. Marcus, Jax, and I are agricultural consultants looking at farmland. And if we get stopped? Washington asked. We won't, Rodriguez said confidently. I've been crossing this border for 3 years with my security work. I know which guards ask questions and which ones don't. Trust me. The vehicles were carefully packed. No obvious weapons, nothing that would draw attention. The serious equipment was hidden in false compartments that Rodriguez's company had designed for exactly this kind of work. To any border guard, they'd look like exactly what their papers said they were. Remember, Jax addressed the group one final time. Once we cross, we're in their territory. No backup, no safety net. We execute the plan, we extract, and we disappear. Clean, professional, by the numbers. They left in 3 groups 30 minutes apart. Marcus rode with Jax and Chen, watching the Texas landscape roll by. Fields and ranches. Honest people doing honest work. Unaware that predators operated just miles away with impunity. You ever think about what happens after? Chen asked from the back seat. After what? Marcus replied. After we pull this off, say everything goes perfect. We get El Cuervo, destroy his operation, hand everything to the authorities. Then what, you think the cartel just forgets? Marcus had thought about this. They'll remember, but they'll also learn. You don't mess with someone who has 15 highly trained friends willing to cross borders for him. Fear works both ways. The first crossing went smoothly. Rodriguez's team passed through with barely a glance at their papers. Corporate security doing site assessments was common enough that the guards waved them through without interest. Thompson's group had a slight delay when one guard questioned their hunting permits, but Rodriguez had anticipated this. The paperwork was perfect, complete with stamps from Mexican wildlife authorities. 10 minutes later they were through. Marcus's group was last. The border guard was young, bored, barely looked at their agricultural consultant documents before stamping them through. Just like that, they were in Mexico. That was too easy, Chen muttered. That's the problem, Jax replied. If we can cross this easily, so can they. That's why people like El Cuervo operate with impunity. The border's a joke to anyone with the right paperwork or the right bribes. They converged at an abandoned ranch 20 miles south, exactly as planned. The property had been purchased 6 months ago through one of Rodriguez's shell companies for exactly this purpose. Remote, defensible, invisible. Phase 1 complete, Rodriguez announced as the last vehicle arrived. Now the real work begins. They transformed the old barn into an operations center. Satellite feeds appeared on laptops. Detailed maps covered the walls. Communication equipment powered up. These middle-aged men in civilian clothes disappeared, replaced by the operators they'd once been. But there was a difference this time. No commanding officer to report to. No rules of engagement from above. No political considerations. Just 15 men, their skills and a mission they'd defined themselves. Latest intel. Rodriguez pulled up fresh satellite images. The compound's active. I count 32 heat signatures, probably guards and workers. 3 vehicles in the motor pool. El Cuervo's personal vehicle is there, so he's definitely on site. Marcus studied the images. The compound was impressive. High walls, guard towers, modern security systems. El Cuervo had built himself a fortress with drug money, believing he was untouchable. He's gotten comfortable, Thompson observed. Look at those guard positions. Predictable patterns. They're not expecting any real threat. Why would they? McKinley said. The Mexican government can't touch them because of corruption. The U.S. can't cross the border officially. Local police are paid off. Who's going to hit them? Us, Marcus said simply. They spent the afternoon in detailed preparation. Every man knew his role, his team, his contingencies. They'd done this hundreds of times before, just never for themselves. The muscle memory was still there. The way they moved, communicated, anticipated each other. As afternoon stretched toward evening, Marcus found himself checking and rechecking his equipment. Old habits. Make sure everything works because your life depends on it. Washington sat down beside him. You know, my wife thinks I'm at a veterans reunion in Austin. What does she really think? She knows I'm lying. She also knows me well enough not to ask. He paused. She made me promise to come home. We all go home, Marcus said firmly. That's the mission. In and out, nobody gets hurt who doesn't need to get hurt. And El Cuervo? He goes home too. Just not his home. He's going to a cell where he belongs. As darkness began to fall, they geared up properly for the first time. Body armor appeared from the hidden compartments. Weapons were assembled and checked. Night vision devices tested. Communication headsets distributed. The transformation was complete. 15 civilians had become something else entirely. A precision strike team that officially didn't exist. Jax gathered them one final time. Listen up. This is real. This is dangerous. But we've trained for worse. We've survived worse. The advantage is ours: surprise, skill, and purpose. They're criminals playing soldier. We're soldiers doing justice. Rules of engagement, Marcus added. Minimum force necessary. Anyone who surrenders, we secure them humanely. Anyone who fights, we respond appropriately. This is about justice, not vengeance. Everyone clear? 15 voices answered in unison. Clear. Then let's move. They loaded into the vehicles, a somber quiet settling over them. This was the moment every operator knew, the calm before action, when training meets reality, when plans face the chaos of execution. The drive to the compound took 40 minutes through darkening countryside. No lights, using night vision to navigate back roads that barely existed on maps. Professional, invisible, deadly. 500 meters from the target, they stopped and moved forward on foot. The compound appeared through the darkness, lights visible, guards walking predictable patterns. El Cuervo's fortress built on suffering and arrogance. Marcus crouched beside Jax, studying their objective. Somewhere in that compound was the man who'd ordered his ranch burned, who'd destroyed 20 years of his life with a casual command, who'd done the same to countless others and never faced consequences. Tonight, consequences arrived. All teams, final radio check. Chen whispered into his headset. One by one, they confirmed. Ready, waiting. Marcus took a slow breath, thinking of his grandfather's barn in flames, of justice delayed, of evil that thrived because good men accepted limitations. Not tonight. Execute, he said quietly. And 15 shadows moved forward into the darkness, toward a reckoning years overdue. The night was alive with tension as the three teams split apart like water flowing around stone. Each man knew his role, had rehearsed it mentally 100 times. But knowing and doing are different things, especially when lives hang in the balance. Chen's team moved first. They were the invisible hand, the ones who would blind the compound before anyone knew what was happening. 5 men, crouched low, approached the external communications hub that Rodriguez's intelligence had identified behind the eastern wall. 30 seconds to power cut, Chen whispered into his radio. His hands worked quickly, attaching a device to the compound's main electrical line. This wasn't simple destruction, it was surgical. Cut the power, cut the backup, cut the communications, all within a 3-second window. Marcus watched from his position, heart steady despite the adrenaline. Beside him, Jax counted down silently on his fingers. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The compound went dark. For exactly 2 seconds, there was perfect silence. Then confusion erupted. Shouts in Spanish, flashlights clicking on, guards running in multiple directions, none of them organized, all of them predictable. They're panicking, Thompson observed from his sniper position on a nearby hill. Not one of them went to a defensive position. These aren't soldiers. They're about to learn the difference, Jax replied. Team 1 moved on the perimeter like ghosts. The guards never saw them coming. Suppressed weapons made quiet coughing sounds. One by one, perimeter guards dropped. Not dead, hit with carefully placed shots to legs and shoulders. Painful but survivable. This wasn't a massacre. It was a lesson. Perimeter secure, Rodriguez reported. 8 guards down, none critical. We've got their weapons. Team 2, you're clear to breach, Jax commanded. Marcus led Team 2 toward the main building. His heart pounded, but his hands were steady. This was familiar territory even after all these years. The building's rear entrance appeared through his night vision. A heavy door, probably locked, definitely monitored. Washington placed a small charge on the lock. Breaching in 3, 2, 1, the door blew inward with a controlled pop. Not loud enough to be an explosion, but definitely attention-getting. They flowed inside in perfect formation, weapons up, scanning corners and angles. 2 guards appeared in the hallway, fumbling with their rifles. They were young, maybe early 20s, eyes wide with confusion and fear. Suelta las armas, Marcus commanded. Drop your weapons. One guard immediately complied, hands shooting up. The other hesitated, finger moving toward his trigger. Thompson was faster. A single shot to the man's shoulder spun him around. His rifle clattered to the floor. Secure them, Marcus ordered. Zip ties appeared. Within seconds, both guards were restrained, placed in a side room. Scared but alive. 2nd floor. Rodriguez's voice crackled in their ears. Master bedroom, northeast corner. That's where El Cuervo sleeps. The team moved up the stairs. More guards appeared. These ones better trained, actually attempting to form defensive positions. Gunfire erupted, real, loud, dangerous. Bullets sparked off walls. Marcus and his team responded with overwhelming precision. These cartel soldiers might have guns, but they had no discipline, no training, no coordination. They shot wildly. The SEAL team shot deliberately. Within 90 seconds, 5 more guards were down, all with non-lethal wounds when possible. The ones who'd tried to surrender were restrained. The ones who'd kept fighting had learned painful lessons. "We've got wounded," McKinley called out, moving forward with his medical bag. Even in combat, he was still a medic first. He began treating the injured guards, stopping bleeding, stabilizing wounds. These guys need hospitals, but they'll live. The master bedroom door stood at the end of the hallway. Heavy wood, probably reinforced. Marcus could hear movement behind it. Furniture scraping, someone shouting orders. "Miguel Zaragoza." Marcus called out in Spanish. "You have nowhere to go. Your guards are down. Your communications are cut. Come out peacefully and nobody else gets hurt. Vete al infierno, go to hell." A burst of automatic gunfire tore through the door from inside. "He chose violence," Jack said flatly. "Okay then." Washington placed another charge, this one bigger. "Everyone back." 3, 2, 1, the door exploded inward. Flashbangs followed, disorienting light and sound designed to overwhelm senses. Marcus and his team flowed through the smoke and chaos. El Cuervo stood behind an overturned bed, a gold-plated pistol in his shaking hands. He was smaller than Marcus expected, maybe 5'7", wearing expensive silk pajamas. His face was twisted with rage and fear. "You're dead," he screamed in English. "All of you. I'll have you hunted down." Marcus moved faster than El Cuervo could track. Years of training compressed into 3 seconds. He closed the distance, deflected the pistol, and slammed the cartel boss against the wall. The gold pistol clattered away, useless. "Remember a ranch in Texas?" Marcus's voice was ice cold. "Burned down 2 nights ago. That was mine." Recognition flashed in El Cuervo's eyes, followed by confusion, then dawning terror. You're just a rancher." "How did you—" "I was a rancher," Marcus corrected, pressing him harder against the wall. "Before that, I was a Marine. And you just reminded me which one matters more." Jack secured El Cuervo with professional efficiency. Zip ties. Search for weapons. Miranda rights read in perfect Spanish, even though they had no legal authority to do so. This was about doing things right, even in impossible circumstances. Meanwhile, Team 3 had reached the warehouse. Washington surveyed the massive space filled with cocaine, heroin, and methamphetamine. Millions of dollars in drugs destined to destroy lives across 2 countries. "Boss, you need to see this," he radioed to Marcus. But before destroying anything, Rodriguez was photographing everything. Computer hard drives were being copied. Ledgers documented. Financial records preserved. This wasn't just a raid, it was a criminal case being built in real time. "We've got distribution networks going back 8 years, Rodriguez reported, his laptop glowing in the darkness. "Names, dates, routes, payments to officials. This is enough to prosecute for decades." "Then document everything," Marcus ordered. "We do this right." Back in the main building, McKinley was treating wounded guards with the same care he'd give anyone. "You know, for bad guys, they're pretty cooperative once they realize we're not here to kill them," he observed. One young guard, barely 20, looked up at Marcus with confused eyes. "Who are you people?" "Army, DA." "We're nobody," Marcus replied. "Just some citizens who got tired of waiting for justice." Outside, the compound was fully secured. 32 cartel members were restrained, treated for injuries, and organized in groups. Not one had been killed, though several would need surgery. This precision, this restraint, it was the difference between soldiers and murderers. Chen's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got company. Mexican Federal Police, about 20 minutes out." Someone must have heard the shooting. "Perfect timing," Jax replied. "Rodriguez, you make that call yet?" "On it now." Rodriguez dialed a satellite phone, reaching his contact in the DEA, one of the few agents they trusted completely. "Agent Morrison?" "This is Rodriguez. Remember that package I mentioned? It's gift-wrapped and ready for pickup. Coordinates incoming. You might want to bring a lot of people. And maybe some prosecutors." El Cuervo, secured in his own bedroom, stared at Marcus with hatred. "You think this changes anything?" "The cartel is bigger than me. They'll kill you. Your family. Everyone you love." Marcus knelt down to eye level. "Here's what's going to change. You're going to prison. Your organization is finished. Every official you've paid off is about to be exposed. And every rancher, every family, every person you've terrorized, they're going to sleep better knowing you're in a cage. And you? You think you'll just walk away? We were never here, Marcus said simply. You got hit by anonymous forces. Maybe rivals, maybe vigilantes, maybe ghosts. Doesn't matter. What matters is justice finally caught up with you. The sound of helicopters grew louder. Lights appeared in the distance. Mexican federal police, DEA, probably others. A task force that had been trying to nail El Cuervo for years was about to receive the biggest gift of their careers. Time to disappear, Jax announced. Everyone out now. The 15 men faded into the darkness as quickly as they'd appeared, leaving behind a secured compound, mountains of evidence, and one very confused cartel boss. They moved through the night like smoke, reaching their vehicles while sirens and helicopters descended on El Cuervo's fortress. From a distant hillside, Marcus watched the official forces swarm the compound. He thought about justice, about the line between law and righteousness, about what happens when good men decide limitations don't apply. No regrets? Jax asked beside him. Marcus thought about his burning ranch, about 20 years of peace destroyed, about a choice he'd made to become a warrior one more time. None, he said quietly. Sometimes the system needs help. Tonight we helped. They disappeared into the Mexican night. Ghosts who delivered justice and vanished, leaving only results behind. The convoy of 3 vehicles moved through the darkness without headlights, relying entirely on night vision and GPS. Behind them, the sky glowed with helicopter searchlights and emergency vehicle strobes. The Mexican authorities had descended on El Cuervo's compound like a hammer, but the 15 ghosts who'd made it possible were already melting into the night. Chen, status on pursuit, Jax called from the lead vehicle. Clean so far, Chen replied, monitoring police frequencies on his equipment. They're too busy processing the scene. Nobody's even mentioned vehicles leaving the area. We're invisible. But Marcus knew invisible didn't mean safe. They were still 30 miles inside Mexico with enough weapons to start a small war. Every minute on foreign soil increased the risk of discovery. Take the mountain route, Rodriguez instructed Thompson's vehicle. It's longer, but there's an old mining road that bypasses the main checkpoints. I've used it before for, let's call them discrete crossings. The vehicles turned onto what barely qualified as a road, more like a suggestion of a path through rocky terrain. The ride became rough, jarring, but it put distance between them and any potential response. Washington looked out the window at the barren landscape. You know what's crazy? We just executed a military operation on foreign soil, dismantled a cartel compound, captured their leader, and we're driving away like we were never there. That's exactly what makes it work, McKinley replied from the back seat. Nobody expects 15 middle-aged civilians to do what special operations forces can't officially do. We're too impossible to be real. But Marcus wasn't celebrating yet. His mind was already on the next problem. Rodriguez, what happens when El Cuervo starts talking? When he tells them Americans hit his compound? He'll tell them, Rodriguez agreed. But who'll believe him? A cartel boss claiming he was attacked by highly trained American operators who vanished without a trace? Sounds like an excuse. Sounds like maybe rival cartels hit him and he doesn't want to admit weakness. The evidence will speak louder than his excuses, Chen added. 8 years of criminal records, distribution networks, corrupt officials. The prosecutors will be too busy building cases to worry about his conspiracy theories. The convoy climbed higher into the mountains. The temperature dropped. Through the night vision, Marcus could see the terrain becoming more treacherous. Steep drops, narrow passages, the kind of route that required full concentration. Vehicle behind us, Thompson suddenly announced. Single set of headlights about 2 miles back. Everyone tensed. Jax grabbed binoculars with night vision capabilities. Can't tell who it is. Could be nothing. Could be Cartel looking for revenge. Speed up or engage? Marcus asked. Neither yet. Let's see if they're actually following or just using the same road. For 10 agonizing minutes, they watched the headlights maintain distance. Not closing in, but not falling back either, just following. That's not random, Rodriguez said quietly. Someone's tracking us. Jax made a decision. Thompson, you and your team split off at the next junction. Create a diversion, draw them away. Don't engage unless necessary. We need to get the main group back across the border. Copy that, Thompson responded, his vehicle already preparing to break formation. The junction appeared, a fork in the mining road. Thompson's vehicle veered left while the other two continued right. The headlights behind them hesitated for just a moment, then followed Thompson. They took the bait, Thompson reported. We'll lead them on a chase, then lose them in the canyon network. You guys get home. Marcus felt a pang of concern for the 5 men now drawing danger away from the group, but he trusted Thompson. These weren't amateurs who panicked under pressure. The remaining 2 vehicles pushed harder through the mountain passes. The border was close now, maybe 15 miles, but those could be the most dangerous 15 miles of the entire operation. Chen, hack into border camera systems, Jax ordered. I need to know which crossing points are busy and which are quiet. Already on it. Chen's fingers flew across his laptop keyboard, exploiting security vulnerabilities he'd mapped weeks ago. San Vicente crossing is dead quiet. 1 guard processing a commercial truck. That's our window. They adjusted course, heading for the smaller, less monitored crossing point. These border stations saw so much legitimate traffic that slipping through was often easier than trying to sneak across the open desert. Marcus checked his phone. A text from Thompson. Lost our tail in the canyons.
Heading to alternate crossing.
See you on the other side. Relief washed through the group. All 15 men were still safe, still free, still ghosts. 5 minutes to border, Rodriguez announced. Everyone, civilian mode. We're agricultural consultants returning from a disappointing site visit. Look tired, look bored, look forgettable. They stripped off tactical gear, stuffing everything into hidden compartments with practiced efficiency. Body armor became laptop bags. Weapons disappeared into false bottom equipment cases. Within 3 minutes, they looked exactly like what their forged documents claimed. Businessmen heading home after a long day. The San Vicente border crossing appeared in the darkness. A single guard station, minimal lighting, 1 bored-looking officer processing paperwork for a produce truck. Remember, Jack said quietly, we're exhausted consultants who wasted a day looking at farmland that wasn't suitable. Act the part. They pulled up to the checkpoint. The guard was young, maybe 25, already looking forward to his shift ending. He glanced at their documents with minimal interest. Purpose of visit? He asked in accented English. Agricultural consultation, Marcus replied, letting exhaustion creep into his voice. Waste of time, honestly. The land's too rocky, water table's all wrong. My boss isn't going to be happy. The guard smiled slightly, recognizing the universal experience of disappointing a boss. He stamped their passports without even checking the vehicle. Have a better day tomorrow. Thanks, Marcus replied, and just like that they were across, back in the United States. Back home. Mission accomplished. They drove in silence for several miles, the weight of what they'd done settling over them. Then Chen started laughing, quiet at first, then building. We actually did it, he said, shaking his head in disbelief. We actually pulled it off. The laughter spread through the vehicles as tension released. They'd executed an impossible mission, operated completely outside official channels, and returned without a single casualty on either side. Thompson's team just crossed at Laredo, Rodriguez reported, checking his phone. Everyone's back stateside. We're clear. They rendezvoused at a truck stop 40 miles north of the border. All 15 men, safe and accounted for, standing in a parking lot under fluorescent lights like ordinary travelers. But they weren't ordinary. They'd just done something extraordinary. Jax gathered them together one final time. What happened tonight doesn't get discussed. Not with family, not with friends, not with anyone. We were at a veterans reunion in Austin, remember? That's the story. That's the only story. What about Marcus's ranch? McKinley asked. The sheriff, the insurance company, people will have questions about the cartel. Let me handle that, Marcus said. The official story is that Mexican authorities raided the Zaragoza compound based on anonymous intelligence. El Cuervo's arrest will make international news by tomorrow. The connection to my ranch will seem like justice finally working, nothing more. Rodriguez powered down his equipment, wiping drives and destroying evidence of their planning. I've already started planting the narrative on secure channels. By tomorrow, law enforcement circles will believe the raid was a joint DEA Mexican federal police operation that was kept quiet for operational security. Nobody will question it because the results are too good. Washington looked at Marcus. So what now? You rebuild? Marcus thought about his burned ranch. about the choice he'd made to become a warrior again, about the line between justice and revenge that they'd walked so carefully. "I rebuild," he confirmed, "but I'm not the same man who was just a rancher. I'm someone who knows that sometimes you have to fight for peace. And I've got 14 brothers who proved they'll fight beside me." They said their goodbyes in that truck stop parking lot. Handshakes and embraces, promises to stay in touch, acknowledgement of a bond that had been tested and proven unbreakable. As they departed in different directions, Marcus stood alone for a moment, watching the sun begin to rise over Texas. Somewhere south, El Cuervo was facing prosecution. Somewhere ahead, his ranch waited to be rebuilt. He climbed into his truck and headed home, carrying secrets that would never be spoken but would always be remembered. They'd ridden south with purpose. They'd returned with justice, and the world would never know the ghosts who'd made it happen. The sun rose over the compound as helicopters appeared on the horizon. DEA, Mexican Federal Police, and a joint task force that had been trying to nail the Zaragoza cartel for years. They arrived to find a fully secured site, restrained suspects, and evidence meticulously organized and documented. The 15 operators had already faded into the landscape, leaving no trace except the results of their work. Official reports would attribute the operation to anonymous tips and coordinated interagency cooperation. Nobody asked too many questions about the gift they'd been handed. Marcus returned to Texas to find reporters at his burned ranch. The story had leaked, not the truth, but a version of it. Local veterans' ranch destroyed by cartel retaliation. Sympathy poured in. Donations. Offers to help rebuild. He stood in the ashes and realized something profound. What he'd lost in buildings, he'd gained in purpose. The ranch would rise again, but more importantly, he'd remembered who he was, not just a rancher, but a man who stood up when others couldn't. 3 months later, El Cuervo pleaded guilty to 47 counts, facing multiple life sentences. His testimony brought down corrupt officials on both sides of the border. The cartel's operation in that sector collapsed entirely. Marcus's ranch was rebuilt, this time with help from the community and a few anonymous donations from retired security consultants. The new barn had a plaque, built on ashes, stronger than before. Jax visited for the reopening. They stood on the porch, watching the sun set over restored land. "Any regrets?" Jax asked. Marcus thought about it, about the line they'd crossed, the risks they'd taken, the justice they'd delivered outside official channels. "We did what needed doing, the way it needed doing. Sometimes the system works, sometimes it needs help. And when it needs help again," Marcus smiled slightly, "then I know 15 guys who are apparently terrible at staying retired." They laughed, these warriors turned guardians. These men who'd learned that battles don't end when you leave the service, they just change shape. Sometimes justice wears a uniform, sometimes it wears overalls and rebuilds what evil tried to destroy. The ranch stood strong, a testament not to vengeance, but to resilience. Marcus had lost everything and gained something more valuable. The reminder that some things are worth fighting for, and some fights are worth having brothers beside you. As darkness fell, lights illuminated the new barn, casting away shadows. Tomorrow the work of ranching would continue. But tonight Marcus Washington stood on his land, his rebuilt, renewed, reclaimed land, and knew he was exactly where he belonged. The cartel had sent a message. Marcus and his brothers had sent a reply. Some fires destroy, others forge steel,